Mexican cartels have seized control of the Texas border, and American gangs now answer to foreign masters. Texas sheriffs are finally breaking their silence with bombshell testimony that's shaking the foundations of American sovereignty.
There's even been a day I was told that was northern border apprehensions, were higher than southern border apprehensions. But look, we can't count on other countries to secure our border.
What they're revealing has forced Governor Abbott into emergency action. This isn't just a border crisis, it's an invasion that's already reached your backyard. Sheriffs break their silence. For years, the American public has been fed a sanitized version of what's happening at our southern border. We've been told it's a humanitarian crisis or a migration challenge. But the sheriffs who actually patrol these communities are telling a very different story, one of foreign invasion, criminal takeover, and the systematic erosion of American sovereignty. Goliad County Sheriff Roy Boyd dropped a bombshell during his testimony before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. His words cut through the political noise and delivered a truth that mainstream media has desperately tried to bury.
The presence of Mexican cartels in the United States has changed how domestic criminal organizations function. It has created a negative impact that is becoming more pervasive day by day. Street gangs, motorcycle gangs, and other domestic criminal organizations have all been relegated to the status of mere contractors and subcontractors for the cartels.
Let that sink in for a moment. American street gangs, the Bloods, the Crips, and motorcycle clubs that once controlled their own territories are now taking orders from Mexican drug lords. This isn't speculation or conspiracy theory. This is sworn testimony from a county sheriff who has witnessed this transformation firsthand over decades of law enforcement service. Sheriff Boyd served as chief deputy for the Victoria County Sheriff's Office before becoming the Goliad County Sheriff. He watched the Gulf Cartel systematically take over the cocaine trade in his region. They didn't just compete with local dealers, they absorbed them into their operation or eliminated them entirely. Independent drug dealers who refused to comply with cartel orders simply disappeared. Their families, terrified of retaliation, often didn't even report them missing. The sheriff testified that at least 10 drug dealers in his area who refused to dilute their product as the cartel demanded were disappeared, never to be seen again. Only one family went public seeking justice for their son. The rest remained silent out of fear, the same fear that now grips communities across America.
So is it fair to say this is a problem that is not limited to the border, but extends throughout the country?
This is a national security issue of the highest level, sir, and it is coast to coast, border to border.
Sheriff Boyd isn't talking about a regional problem contained to border communities. He's describing a nationwide takeover that has already occurred while most Americans weren't paying attention. The cartels haven't just crossed our border, they've established operations in every single state in the Union, from California to Maine, from Texas to Minnesota. The numbers tell a story of catastrophic failure under previous policies. During the first Trump administration, the Goliad County Sheriff's Office arrested an average of 77 people per year. By 2021, that number exploded to 252. They thought that was phenomenal, unprecedented. But by 2024, it reached a staggering 502 arrests, nearly 7 times higher than just a few years earlier. Here's the critical detail that puts this in perspective. Goliad County is 180 miles from the Mexican border, halfway between Laredo and Houston. This isn't a border county experiencing spillover effects. If cartel activity has penetrated that deeply into the American heartland, imagine what's happening in communities even further from the border, in your hometown, in your neighborhood. Terrell County Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland brings a unique perspective to this crisis. With 26 years of experience as a U.S. Border Patrol agent before becoming sheriff, he's watched the border situation evolve over 3 decades under multiple administrations. His assessment of the current situation reveals both hope and lingering danger.
And what we've seen the last 2 months since President Trump took over, we haven't seen before. We haven't seen apprehensions this low. There's been a few days below 200 now. There's even been a day I was told it was northern border apprehensions, were higher than southern border apprehensions.
The contrast between administrations couldn't be more stark. Sheriff Cleveland's words reveal just how chaotic things had become. There were actually days when more people were apprehended crossing from Canada than Mexico, simply because the southern border was so overwhelmed that agents couldn't process everyone flooding through. The entire system had collapsed under the weight of uncontrolled migration. According to the Southwest Border Sheriff's Coalition, law enforcement officers reported an average of 187,000 encounters at the southwest border per month during the Biden administration. Under the current administration, that number has been slashed by 94%, averaging just over 11,000 per month. That's not incremental improvement, that's a complete transformation in border security. Zavala County Sheriff Eusebio Salinas Jr. has been protecting his community since 1997, nearly 3 decades of frontline experience. When he says it's night and day, he's not exaggerating for political effect. He's describing the reality on the ground that he witnesses every single day. For years, Border Patrol agents were stuck in processing centers, buried under paperwork while the cartels ran wild outside. Now they're finally back in the field, doing the job they signed up to do. The Southwest Border Sheriff's Coalition recently gathered in Austin to discuss what's next for border security. These are the men and women who live this crisis every day. Their communities bear the brunt of cartel activity. Their families face the dangers. Their perspectives deserve attention. Executive Director Clint McDonald delivered a message about the transformation in morale that should give every American hope and pause. Morale among Border Patrol agents had completely collapsed under previous policies. These dedicated men and women signed up to protect America, only to find themselves reduced to processing clerks, watching helplessly as millions of people poured across the border unchecked. The psychological toll of being forced to stand down while your country is invaded cannot be overstated. Many agents quit. Others suffered from depression and burnout. Now, finally, they're being allowed to do their jobs. But the damage has already been done. The cartels didn't just smuggle people across during those years of chaos. They established networks, recruited collaborators, and embedded themselves into the fabric of American society. As Sheriff Boyd testified, tens of millions of people entered illegally, and many of them are now beholden to the cartels. The infrastructure for criminal operations spanning the entire country is already in place. How foreign criminals conquered American territory. Understanding how we got here requires understanding how the cartels operate. This isn't random criminal activity or opportunistic smuggling. It's a sophisticated business model that has been perfected over decades and exported from Mexico directly into American communities. The cartels run their operations with the efficiency of Fortune 500 companies, but with the brutality of terrorist organizations. Sheriff Roy Boyd explained the transformation during his Senate testimony. More than a decade ago, the major Mexican cartels, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, Gulf Cartel, and others, seized control of the border regions of Mexico. They didn't just dominate the drug trade, they revolutionized their entire business model by adding large-scale human smuggling to their operations.
While illegal immigration has been a historical issue along the U.S.-Mexico border, this changed more than a decade ago when the cartels seized control of the border regions of Mexico and changed their business model to include smuggling of people. When this happened, the cartels began controlling who came across the border and began torturing and killing anyone who attempted to violate their control by crossing into the U.S. without paying the cartels.
In Mexico, the cartels operate under what's called the plaza system, a territorial arrangement where criminal organizations pay government officials for the right to conduct illegal activities in specific regions. It's essentially a franchise model for organized crime. Sheriff Boyd revealed the terrifying truth that the cartels have replicated this exact system within the United States. They're carving up American territory like a cartel kingdom, assigning distribution rights, enforcing territorial boundaries, and eliminating competitors. Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland provided critical context about the human cost of this system during his detailed interview about conditions on the ground in Terrell County, one of the most dangerous stretches of border in the entire country.
So the cartels aren't just in the drug business. They found that there's even more money in the illegal alien smuggling of humans across the border. Because when you look at narcotics, whether it's marijuana that's smoked up or a pill such as fentanyl or meth that's used up, a human can be smuggled again and again and again.
Drugs get consumed, but humans can be exploited indefinitely. This is the cold, brutal calculus that drives cartel operations. A migrant who pays $8,000 to $25,000 to cross the border doesn't walk away free and clear. They enter a system of indentured servitude that can last 8 to 13 years. Some pay off their debt with money earned through legitimate work. Others are forced to smuggle more people or transport drugs into the interior. Women are often trafficked into prostitution rings that operate in every major American city. The cartels maintain extensive intelligence networks and keep detailed records on everyone they smuggle, including names, photographs, and information about family members back home. If someone refuses to cooperate with cartel demands once they're in America, their loved ones pay the price. Sheriff Boyd testified that illegal aliens have told him they had no choice but to commit criminal acts to prevent family members from being tortured, enslaved, or killed. This means that millions of people now living in the United States are effectively cartel assets, ready to be activated for criminal operations at any moment. They're not free people living the American dream. They're indentured servants trapped in a system of exploitation and fear, with their families held hostage across the border. The death toll speaks volumes about the brutality of this system. Sheriff Cleveland shared devastating statistics from his county alone, a county that spans 2,300 square miles of some of the most unforgiving terrain on the entire border.
But to put it in context, historically, we'd have about one death a year of an illegal alien trying to cross our portion of the border. And there's others that we never found, so there likely could have been a few more. But over the last 3.5 years, we've had 37 people perish crossing the Terrell County portion of the U.S.-Mexico border. That's significant. We've gone from 1 to maybe about 13 a year that have perished.
From 1 death per year to 13, a 13-fold increase in human deaths in just one county. Multiply that across the entire 1,254-mile Texas border, and you begin to grasp the humanitarian catastrophe that unfolded under the previous administration's policies. These aren't statistics. They're human beings who died in the desert, drowned in the Rio Grande, or perished from heat exposure because our government failed to secure the border and stop the cartels from luring them into deadly journeys. The fentanyl crisis adds another layer of devastation that touches every community in America. Over 100,000 Americans die from fentanyl overdoses every year, poison that flows directly from cartel operations in Mexico across our porous border. Sheriff Cleveland explained that both political parties argue about whether drugs come through ports of entry or between them. The reality is that it doesn't matter where the drugs cross. What matters is that our borders remain porous enough for the cartels to flood America with enough deadly chemicals to kill the entire population twice over. Operation Lone Star, Texas's flagship border security initiative, has seized over 733 million lethal doses of fentanyl since 2021. That's enough to kill every American, every man, woman, and child, twice over. And those are just the drugs that got caught. How many millions more made it through? The national security implications extend far beyond drugs and human trafficking. Sheriff Cleveland highlighted a terrifying reality that keeps law enforcement officials and intelligence agencies up at night, the vetting problem that no one in Washington wants to talk about honestly. The Border Patrol's mission changed fundamentally after 9/11. They transformed from an immigration agency to an all-threats agency, tasked with preventing terrorists, spies, and political activists from entering alongside traditional migrants seeking economic opportunity. But when they're overwhelmed with processing millions of asylum claims, when they're buried in paperwork instead of patrolling the border, that critical mission becomes impossible to execute. Governor Abbott's response. Governor's to the border crisis has been aggressive, controversial, and legally contested at every turn. His actions represent the most significant assertion of state power on immigration in modern American history, and they've put Texas on a collision course with federal authority that some observers have compared to pre-Civil War tensions over states' rights. Operation Lone Star launched in March 2021, deploying the Texas National Guard and Department of Public Safety to arrest migrants on state charges, including trespassing and smuggling. Since then, Texas has conducted over 500,000 apprehensions, seized massive quantities of fentanyl, and spent billions of dollars on border security. Abbott has argued that Texas is defending itself against an invasion under constitutional authority granted by Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. In January 2024, Abbott made one of his most controversial moves, seizing Shelby Park in Eagle Pass and blocking federal Border Patrol agents from accessing a 2.5-mile stretch of the border. The move prompted cease and desist letters from the Department of Homeland Security and threats of Justice Department referrals. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton defied the demands outright, asserting the state's constitutional right to self-defense when the federal government refuses to fulfill its obligations. The standoff drew immediate support from 25 Republican governors who signed letters backing Texas's position and raised fears of a constitutional crisis not seen since the Civil Rights era. The Supreme Court allowed Border Patrol to cut razor wire that Texas had installed, but notably did not halt Texas's broader security measures. The confrontation exposed deep fissures between state and federal authority over border enforcement that remain unresolved. Abbott has also pushed aggressively for legislative action. His priority this session is comprehensive bail reform, ensuring that undocumented individuals accused of serious felonies can be held in custody rather than released back onto American streets to disappear into the interior.
To be clear, this is not a right or left issue. This is a common sense public safety issue. Fixing broken bail requires these three things. 1, judges must automatically deny bail for violent crimes like murder, rape, and human trafficking unless there is clear and convincing evidence that the defendant will appear in court and not endanger the community.
Abbott has pledged $110 million in continued funding for border security operations, the same amount provided in the previous budget, and announced partnerships with the new Trump administration to enhance enforcement across every level of government. The collaboration has included additional troop deployments, expanded drone surveillance, expedited deportation procedures, and closer coordination between state and federal law enforcement agencies. But the sheriffs on the ground are cautioning against premature celebration. Yes, the numbers have dropped dramatically, 94% in some areas. Yes, morale among Border Patrol agents has improved. Yes, the immediate crisis at the border appears to be stabilizing. But the infrastructure the cartels built during the previous administration remains completely intact. Millions of cartel-affiliated individuals are already embedded in American communities from coast to coast. Sheriff Boyd's assessment is sobering. With only 605 agencies actively assisting ICE in the field out of more than 18,000 total law, but enforcement agencies nationwide, federal authorities simply cannot tackle the cartel problem alone. The solution requires a fundamental restructuring of law enforcement cooperation at every level, federal, state, and local, working together with shared intelligence, coordinated operations, and unified purpose. The federal government has taken additional steps to confront the cartel threat directly. The DEA designated major Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations in 2025, unlocking powerful new tools including targeted military strikes, comprehensive asset freezes, and enhanced prosecution authorities. Treasury sanctions have targeted cartel financial networks, following the money that flows from American streets back to Mexican cartel leaders. Covert CIA operations have reportedly deployed special units to hunt cartel leaders in coordination with Mexican authorities. But the challenge remains immense and ongoing. The cartels have proven remarkably adaptive, shifting tactics and routes in response to enforcement pressure with stunning speed. They use drones for surveillance and smuggling. They dig sophisticated tunnels that can take months to discover. They employ counterintelligence operations that rival nation-states. When one corridor closes, they open another. When one leader falls, the next steps up immediately. They've been doing this for decades, and they're very good at it. The sheriffs of Texas have done their duty. They've testified under oath before the United States Senate. They've revealed uncomfortable truths that powerful interests would prefer to keep hidden. They've risked their careers and possibly their personal safety to warn the American people about what's happening on our southern border and what has already spread throughout our nation. The question now is whether Americans will listen and demand sustained action. The cartels have already established their networks from coast to coast. Their operatives are already in place in every state. The infrastructure for trafficking drugs and humans spans the entire country. The situation can improve. The dramatic 94% drop in crossings proves that policy matters enormously, but the damage already done will take years, perhaps decades, to fully undo. Governor Abbott's panic if that's what critics want to call his emergency response, may be the most rational reaction to the crisis these sheriffs have described. When law enforcement officials with decades of combined experience tell you that Mexican cartels now control American criminal organizations, that millions of people are operating as cartel assets within our borders, and that failure to act could turn America into another Mexico, perhaps urgent action is exactly the appropriate response. Perhaps it's the only responsible response. The sheriffs have spoken. They've admitted what many in Washington refuse to acknowledge. For years, we lost control of our border, our sovereignty, and our safety. The only question that remains is whether we have the courage and the commitment to take it back and to never let it happen again. This is the reality that mainstream media doesn't want you to see. American sheriffs, under oath, testifying before the United States Senate that Mexican cartels have conquered American territory and turned our own criminal organizations into their servants. Share this video with everyone you know. Let people understand what's really happening at our border and what's already happening in their own communities. Because this isn't just Texas's problem anymore. It's not just a border state issue. It's coast to coast, border to border, as Sheriff Boyd testified. And it's every American started paying attention. Do you think Texas officials really lost control, or is this being exaggerated for political pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments and join the discussion.